Great. So thank you all very much for turning up to our talking circle, which I think is a great name. As Carla has already said, we're trying to be a little bit organized and introduce some classroom discipline into this. So if you want to make a point or join the discussion, then please raise your hand and we'll kind of work our way around. When Cara and I were talking about how we should run this just before the meeting, we kind of decided that it actually, judging on what we've experienced over the past 2 days so far, it kind of seems that there's two main headings that we can try and investigate a bit further. The first one, it concerns sort of teaching and learning. And it kind of started really for me with James Hughes's keynote right at the beginning, where he introduced the idea that magazines will be working in very different ways in the future and with different workflows that may well have an effect on the requirements for personal resilience and mental well-being in a way that is not the case at the moment. And also there have been other sessions which have looked at trying to teach how to make magazines in a kind of remote fashion. So I think there's a strand that we can investigate there. And then Carla is keen to investigate putting magazine studies on a more respectably academic footing and looking at modes of research and methodologies and that aspect of what we've been doing. And related to that, we have an idea to kick around about a possible journal. And something for you to think about before we finish. If anybody would like to talk about hosting the next Mapping the Magazine, then we're kind of, our ears are open to listening. So we can come back to that later maybe. So if that seems okay, then I'll kind of get things going maybe. And it seems to me that I've kind of already alluded to the difficulties that there may be in teaching teaching people who want to become magazine journalists in the future, or certainly over the coming year, but probably in the future as well. Because I think that once that commercial magazine companies have discovered that they can make magazines without having a big office, and that they can get people to work from home or from shared office spaces and can kind of commute some of that cost onto the cost of producing the magazine onto the actual people producing it, I think that's likely to be a consistent trend. And for us as educators or trainers, depending on which way you want to take that, there's going to be a question of the tools that we use to teach, and that's access to software, access to hardware on which that software can run, how to teach skills remotely, whether we need to introduce aspects of personal resilience into our teaching curricula, into our syllabus, so that giving people a set of tools to allow them to be more used to working on their own or working in very small groups. Looking ahead, there's obviously research to be done on workflows within magazine publishing houses and how those are going to develop. Audience engagement, learning more and better techniques of engaging audiences has come up as an interesting point of discussion as well. But I think on top of all that, and this is particularly because we're of the situation that we work in, of the institutions that we work in, if we have to change all those things, if we change the tools we use, if we change the way we teach, if students are expected to be maybe partly with us and partly not, how do we retain the valuable student experience that I'm sure we all encounter at the moment and encourage at the moment? And this has already raised its head at Cardiff, and I'm sure it has elsewhere, in that those students who had their term time cut short have been quite persistent about inquiring about getting fees back. And this obviously has a fairly structural effect on the way that our institutions work and our conditions of employment. So I think those are things that we can consider under the teaching and learning aspect. I don't know if anybody has any comments that they want to, or points that they want to start with on that. I can see Sharon physically. Oh, yeah, there's a hand there and a clap. Yeah. So yes, Sharon.
I just have to say that I can't put my virtual hand up. It seems that maybe because I'm the host. I don't know.
If you have it on, you have to have the participants list up in the sidebar as well as the comments.
I'm going to do that on the chat. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Sharon, do you have a hand up? Yeah.
At Hertfordshire, we didn't. I have some experience of this because we didn't stop. We had a week to get everything online, and then we carried on. And one of the things was a magazine project, both digital and it was meant to be in print, but it ended up in PDF, which was being done for a final year project. And because someone had been ill, they hadn't actually got very far. And I ended up with 3 students in 3 different countries trying to put together a PDF and a online version in 4 weeks. And I think it went very well. It's now been sent. It was a yearbook for the year. It went to all the students. But the most important thing is that the students should have the software remotely. We were very lucky that Adobe had those free licenses. And I think one of the things that's going to be a challenge is when that license runs out and we're teaching remotely, if our institutions don't pay for it, because the students were great. I produced magazines myself professionally. We managed to find a time everyone was awake. They followed direction, but it was very reliant on having that technology available. And in, you know, WordPress is free, it's a different, but I certainly think it's about as much about availability of technology as it is about student motivational competence.
There is, yeah, what you say is actually pretty much what happened with us as well. And Adobe also were very helpful about extending their licenses. But what we found was that a surprising number of students didn't have the machines, the laptops or the computers that was capable of running the latest version of the Adobe software. So there's an immediate problem of equality of access to kit.
Yeah, and I think that's something, you know, do universities hand out laptops? Who is responsible for that? The other thing we found is that, though not in this case with the students, is that actually our students said that often places to work was as much as an issue as the technology. So you're sharing technology. So when is your slot to have it if you're, you know, you've also got someone else sharing it, but also somewhere quiet where you're away from the noise. And I think that's another issue.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of interest, is anybody's institution discussing the provision of technical equipment to students? Mary, you're muted.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, Tim and Sharon, I was in the same position as well, and it's very much dependent on Adobe and their licenses, and they haven't answered the question yet. In fact, they're still hovering whether to give us all Zoom. Some of us have access, I don't, to it, but other people do. And Zoom, without Zoom and Facebook groups, I could not have taught the unit I taught which is featured on line 1, where the first years make a magazine. And I have to say, the first years, I was also proud of them, because both groups of 20 students each approximately made the magazine. You know, we had ups and downs, but they got there, they did it. They were really resilient. They had a great attitude, a real can-do attitude. And we even had a production day with an industry guest and a virtual guest lecturer talking about freelancing. And I think it's dependent as well, not just on the students, because some years we all know you get more difficult groups and less engagement. But I also think it's dependent on how you interact with them, and the fact that they could message me within reason at any time. I did let them message me and I'd answer them on the weekend. They weren't intrusive, they're very respectful, but towards the end, you know, they could get in touch. And I think that really helped. I know some of the other courses at Bournemouth, you know, the students are all complaining, but we've been very lucky on the multimedia journalism, not so much. We've kept those students, you know, regularly in touch with them. All the level tutors have been active and we've kept them working. And I think that's been a good thing. I think, you know, the tools we've had I've certainly learned this semester, I think will be really, really useful, because we've all had those times where there's a snow day or whatever, nobody can get in. Actually, we can still give the lecture on Zoom. We can still get them doing other activities. The only but for me is the difference in the student equipment. You know, obviously the well-off students have some excellent equipment, they have the right laptops, they can pay for stuff, but the less well-off students, we had a couple who had Chromebook and they could not get InDesign on Chromebook, which was a massive problem. So we got around that by the production editor in each group doing their layouts, and them sort of collaborating. They'd physically do the layouts and the students would take on other jobs to compensate for it. But again, I think what I've learned is that it's about flexibility. It's about the students. I think you have to, a bit of luck comes into it with the students all being really collegiate with each other and actually getting on. And this year I had 2 fantastic groups who all actually liked each other. Last year, not so much, but this year, you know, and I think the crisis made them pull together more.
I think that's really interesting. I think it does raise a point. I don't want to sound like a union rep here, but I think it also raises a point about workload and 24-hour accessibility for us, which sounds great in theory, and it's great for the students, but it's not actually great for the person on the receiving end, I don't think. So that's something that needs to be worked through. Can I ask, Alexandra, I can see you're here. I mean, you have actually, you know, in your paper, you described, well, you showed the phenomenal results that you got out of using different software and teaching different techniques. Could you say a little bit more about how you actually taught students to use that stuff? And you might want to unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, finally. The Photoshop lessons, we got lucky because we could taught them in university yet before we were sent home. The last Photoshop lesson was when we had to go home, all the teachers and students, in the middle of the class because university decided to close. But then we were off about 2 weeks and trying to find another tools. And I found another InDesign substitute, Lucid Press, but everyone who had to pay. So we had to change 3 days before we started our lessons again. And we found the Lucid Press. Sorry, the Scribus. And so we made some, I shared my screen, and I don't remember if it was in this class or the other classes, sorry, that we recorded the lesson. And but I sent them the exercise we made on the virtually, and with addend with how to resolve the exercise. So you should go to menu, file, and so on. So like the solution of the exercise. And we had 1, 2, or 3 lessons with exercises. So we have a 4-hour lesson. So we have time to take doubts and try to explain better, or if the students ask for help. And then we began with the project. And I think all along the project elaboration, of course, students have their doubts in Photoshop and in Scribus, but we try to resolve it as they share their screen. And as you can also participate on their work. And if they didn't find something, I used to work on their computer. And that's how we worked. We also had a test, an exercise for evaluation. And I think the results were really good for the situation we are all. It went well. So, and I received the projects yesterday, so I didn't take a good look at them, but I think they are quite all okay. So that's okay. The great experience. The difference between classes and presential classes and virtual classes, I think that as we have breakout rooms, I could follow the projects individually, in groups, of course, but and it was quite the same, or probably more involvement. We got more involved with the groups because we were just the 3 of us, the 2 elements of the group and the teacher. No one else was trying to talk to me at the same time. So I think the time I was seeing their projects with the groups, just individually in the breakout rooms, I think we took the best of times to take all the doubts they had and try to resolve their projects. So it's a different way of teaching, of course, but I don't think it went wrong. I think it was okay.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very useful.
Thank you.
Can I just come back to the question of whether anybody's institution or university is making any moves towards this problem of equality of access to?
May I add something to that subject and to the news magazine too, because I know the project very well. Could I?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, about the technological, about Lusófona, I know that we told students that they could have laptops from the university if they needed, for the ones that didn't have a proper ones, and they could come and schedule a room for being just them on a room for working with software and things like that. That's what we have done on these last 3 months. Now we have reopened just for the practical classes. But we still don't, we don't know exactly how it's going to be on September, October.
Yeah.
I also had something.
Yeah.
Let me just talk about the project just a little bit, because this project was an idea of me. It started 10 years ago, more or less, first with a newspaper, and then it became a news magazine. And my colleagues from the BA told me that I'm crazy and the team is crazy because it's a first-year project, and they tell me that it should be a last-year project, not a first one. But we make it work, don't you, Alexandra and Teresa?
Yeah.
We make it work, and it seems really students suffer. And the more interesting thing is that we have here our suffering students.
Yes.
From the two students from the last year that have done on print and in school, okay, in the university, and we have 6 other students from the first year that have been with Alexandra this semester and with Ruth doing like that. When we went to the virtual, I told the team, we are going to let it down here because it's impossible. We have already done the first things that everybody had decided at the groups, had decided what would be the name of the news magazines because it's from scratch. And then I thought, if this is so difficult to engage at class, so it's not going to be possible. So I got out of the project. I'm going to do it by myself, but Alexandra and Ruth, that are brilliant, they said, no, we are going to do it anyway, and they found a way to do it, and even to use all the materials that we usually use. They were just fantastic. That's what I was. Just one little thing. What I discovered is that this is a project that we should do, because this year for the first time, my students, when they got on the first classes, the news magazines, the Portuguese news magazines, they told me like this, and they are here, some of them, they can tell if it's true or not. What's this? What's this? Does anyone read this? Still read this? And it's like an history. But so if they don't have the contact with the paper, they are not going to have it anywhere. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, I remember we discussed this, because for the students, when you show Carla, you appeared with the several magazines, printed magazines, they feel a strange thing, so they are more used to read and receive information through digital channels. I was wondering, we all agree, and we all saw the importance of images, especially photographs, for all the different kinds of magazines that you all talked about. I was wondering if in your projects with your students, you also pay attention to this dimension, meaning that do you produce your images as well? Because our project also intends to put the students a little bit as a photographing some of the journalist pieces that they are writing. So we work also with a colleague that is a photographer that tries to teach how to use a camera that we lend to the students. The university lends the cameras and all the technical material needed to produce a photograph. And of course, we also teach together, me and my colleague that is not here, is the photographer. We also try to teach about visual culture and the visual grammar, so that they have a more conscious about how to read an image, so that they can try to produce. So I was wondering if you only use photos that you get from the internet, or you also produce or try to produce the images with your students, like we try to do, not always very successfully, but sometimes with very surprising results. I don't know, Mary talked about this.
Yes, so are you directing this to Mary, or Carla, or Alexandra, or even Jael?
No, to Mary, because I know our project, so I'm addressing this to the other universities. Do you also teach about photojournalism, photography, and how to make photographs?
Not so much. We have a technical instructor at Bournemouth who covers all that as well as in design, but they have obviously they have camera tuition because it's a multimedia course, but we don't have photojournalism as such. Previously at Solent, when I was at Solent, we did have a photojournalism course. However, that sadly wasn't very well subscribed and it had to close. I think there's certainly room for some options around photojournalism. But also I think for the magazine perspective, from my first years, I encourage them to source images as they would do if they're working on a magazine, because generally magazines do tend to have photographers or they source images.
Okay.
Sharon has raised her hand and has something to say about this to Sharon Boyd.
Yeah, just a short piece, and actually a colleague of mine, Betsy Edgerton, is also in this panel. So the way we've accomplished that, and this may or may not be as feasible in every place, is that we team up with other departments. So we actually get students in our photography department frequently to work for or on the magazine. So either as a course or as, you know, unpaid freelancers. And also we do have a photojournalism program, and occasionally we'll get, they more heavily contribute to the school newspaper. So by teaming up journalism students with students in photography and photojournalism, we've managed to get original photographic work.
Okay.
We do as well at Cardiff. We have a similar arrangement to what Mary was describing, where it's more sort of technical demonstrators who come in and do the actual technical teaching about taking photographs, and then obviously by looking at and analysing magazines, whether it's in print or online, we kind of can have discussions around what makes a good photograph or not. But we do then expect students from very early on, this is just a one-year course, we expect them very early on to go out and get their own photographs to illustrate their stories with. And we very rapidly build on that to include video as well, and audio. Again, taught by the same way, mainly through technical demonstrators, but then improved through practice.
I would like to know if our students that are here and that the experience of the news magazine, if any of them would like to say a word to tell us about their experience in the other part of the room. Marta, Bianca, Clarice, Mariana. Clarice or Mariana, because they are from the second year, the physical magazine, and one of Bianca, Marta, because she has the idea of being here with all the team, and it was a great idea.
On my point of view, doing the magazine from home and all with the problems of the internet, of not being in the place that it's completely silent, and not have the teacher near me if the computer have any problem. But it was a really great experience. I love doing the magazine. I want to print it. When we can go out, I will print my magazine. And I love doing that. It was really fun, and it was a lot of work, but in the end, I liked very much.
Clarice and Marianne, they are both on site, so I have them here, and they are exchanging SMS saying, "Speak, you speak, you speak, you." So,
okay. I could go on talking about this for a long, long time, but obviously not everybody is interested in that. There's just one more thing that I want to ask around before handing over to Carla. And that is this idea of personal resilience being built into the syllabus, which not just for journalists or magazine journalists, but maybe for students generally, if we're going to have more remote working, more people trying to educate themselves through their own efforts or on their own. Has anybody's university made any moves towards including that in the syllabus? Because I guess we probably all have experienced the fact that there's been a rise in referrals to student counselling over the years, and sometimes it's kind of reaching quite frightening proportions. So is there any move towards anything like that anywhere?
Sir, I couldn't get the beginning of the question, Tim, sorry.
Is there any move in any institution or university towards including more aspects of self-resilience, mental well-being to the syllabus? Has it even been a topic of discussion? Because I think it's probably quite important.
We're talking about mental health, if I got it right.
Yeah.
A sílabus é o programa, é no programa. Se no programa das disciplinas está a resiliência, é o que eu percebo.
Oh, as far as I know, I don't think so, but it should be, yes, for sure.
Okay.
Can I have some words?
Yes.
At the university where I'm studying, they are offering some mentorships. So they have developed some programs where professionals are working with students studying different courses, and they also doing some mental health support, and also running some resilience and counseling sessions.
Is that support done by trained professionals, as it were?
Yes, the university has a hub for entrepreneurs and students that want to start businesses or have some ideas, research ideas or projects. And the alumni of the university help as mentors to support the students.
Okay, well, I think mentorship is certainly always very helpful, and certainly in helping you not feel alone in the world. So thank you, Jael.
Bianca wants to say a word about that. It's just Bianca. She has raised her something.
Yeah. As a student, I think regarding this mental health thing, I think it's very important to speak up about it, because during this pandemic, and I mean, none of us were used to being home so much, especially doing university stuff. So I think it would be very important to have a program regarding mental health, especially if we continue like this at home, because as I was saying, during this pandemic, I saw a lot of my colleagues and friends suffered a lot mentally with this period of time. So I think it would be very important to have a program regarding that. That's just what I wanted to say.
Yeah, well, no, thank you very much, Bianca. It's really valuable to hear that from the student perspective.
Thank you.
So Sharon has asked, can you unmute, Sharon, and do the question yourself?
Sorry.
Sure, I would love to. Oh, did you mean me?
No, yes, you. Yes, sorry.
Okay. I would love to hear from the students what you think that should look like, because most colleges have services for students who are struggling in a variety of ways, and frequently a professor who notices somebody's having a hard time will refer them, and that's not, I think, what you have in mind. So I'd love to hear what you think that should look like.
Maybe Bianca?
So you're asking what the program should look like, is that it?
Not exactly like create the program, but what colleges and universities do typically have is a counseling center and ways in which students can get assistance when they're having a hard time, right? But that's separate from the classroom. That's external to the curriculum. And I think I hear you saying that you'd like this to be part of the curriculum. And I just wonder if you could describe what that would look or feel like from a student perspective.
Yeah, well, I think it would be very important. And I think we would all feel very safe, or safer, the students, if we knew that the teachers are equipped, that they know that we are going through something mentally. Like sometimes we might feel a bit lost regarding that. because we think that the teachers maybe don't pay that much attention, or I've seen a lot of people having this conversation online, that they don't think the teachers are trained for it. And I think that's the reality of it. Teachers aren't trained to deal with these situations at school, because their job is to teach us, of course. Not really, I mean, it's not on the book, I would say, to take care of our mental health. But I think it would be very important that more training would be done for the teachers. Some specialists could give them some training about it. I think the students would feel a lot safer speaking to their teachers about that, because sometimes they don't have, we don't have the courage to speak to a professional like a therapist or something, or at home. So maybe to the teachers, speaking to the teachers would be safer, yeah.
Okay, other Sharon Magnus, did you have something to say? You had your hands clapping at one point.
Yeah, sorry, and I've had difficulty with the Zoom. I'm a bit wary of that. We have had mental health training, but the problem is the expectation that tutors can be counsellors can be a lot of responsibility on tutors who do not go through 3 years. Now, it's one thing to be a tutor who can refer onwards, but to expect tutors to take on the understanding of the sophistication, having been a programme leader, knowing when you're out your depth, is really important, and it can lead to major difficulties. Our university did actually invest in some resilience training. It's very hard to measure how satisfactory that was. What I can tell you is it wasn't universal, it was one department, and it didn't increase student satisfaction. So whether they were more resilient but less satisfied, I think there is I can see that for students, they would like to make an initial approach to their teachers, and they should. But I think the expectation that your tutor then can deal with this in anything other than a first aid triage is an unfair expectation on the tutor, and it changes them into a therapist. So having had experience of this and where it can go wrong in terms of pastoral, I think that resilience training is a very difficult one. Do you farm it out as happened to the professionals? But what happens, and it depends on the students. And then again, what we're talking about here is not resilience, it's approaching your tutor to have them to hand out, to work with you on your mental health. That's not quite the same thing. So I think we need to be clear about our terminology, and also clear about where the buck stops. I'd be all in favour of universities investing a great deal more on counselling services, and before this all happened, that was certainly something that the mental health report was the preliminary findings. But I think there is a risk that this could become just that tutors who became tutors are expected to be counsellors, and they are different things. That's it.
So can I, well, I'll come back to you in a second, Sharon. Can I just ask Bianca, were you meaning what Sharon was talking about there, that you feel safer to approach your tutor as the first point of contact, or you want the tutor to be able to actually, you know, do the helping, even if it's a very difficult situation?
Well, I think what we would like to see, I think I'm speaking for all of the students, or for the students I know, we would like to, not for the tutor to treat us because they're not therapists or any of that, right? It's completely different, but to just know that they have had some training, so that we can speak to them about this, and they can then lead us to someone more professional in the area, you know, so that we could get some actual help. So I'm not saying teachers have to be the therapists at school. I just think that knowing they know what mental health is, that they could help us, you know.
Yeah, so demonstrating an awareness.
Yeah,
May I-
exactly. Showing awareness, I think that would be very important.
May I add something? I just wanted to say that mental health issues, it's not a problem of university, it's much bigger. And the problem is that no one talks about it, still don't talk about it. It's the poor family of healthcare. Now we are talking a lot because of COVID, because of the consequences of what we are living. But we know in our heart that it's not like that. Everybody that has mental problems are always afraid of saying it. And the truth is that I think almost all have mental problems, because mental problems, it's part of us. We are not just a physical part. So I try, and I think that my students know that, I try to deal that with naturally. But I agree with Sharon, we can't be therapists, of course not, it's impossible, it's not fair, like Sharon said. But we could be attentive.
Yeah. Sharon BP, did you want to come back on that?
No, I think I was mostly just going to amplify that same idea. And I really appreciate what you've said, Bianca. And I think what Sharon said is right on, that, you know, teachers, professors, tutors can't be therapists, but they certainly can be far more accommodating and tuned in. And they can recognize that people are coming into the classroom not just to learn subject matter. They're not like buckets to be filled or even people to be inspired, that they're coming in with a whole range of things going on in their lives, and that exists. And I know that in the remote emergency instruction period, when we all went online suddenly, everybody at our college was instructed to relax the expectations a bit and be more accommodating. And I think, to Carla's point, it's not just COVID, it's always true that students are struggling with a lot of things. So I think that sensitivity training, that giving professors permission not to teach their students the way they remember learning when they were students, is really important. And then those referrals have to go to professionals.
Okay, do we have to read that raise their hand again? And Carolina, yes. Same problem that I have, she can't raise her hand and she did it on the chat. So Carolina,
I don't know if Carolina is still talking about the resilience because of COVID, and of course, as Sharon just said, it's not only because of COVID, it's a constant problem. But I was thinking about another type of resilience, relating more with the magazine study specifically and journalism in particular, is the transition from the university to the working environment, the real working environment. And sometimes when you face what they call the reality and all the ethical issues, the ways out you do good journalism, in the case of news magazines, but I think this is a general question. What kind of resilience tips to endure the due reality of the newsrooms when the students do this transition, because it's also a political question. You teach them what we teach them what we think it's fair journalism and the ethical position, and then when students go to the real newsrooms, maybe they will show different. Do you have any strategies concerning this specific kind of resilience?
Yeah, if I can jump in, I would say use your alumni as much as possible to come back and talk to the students about what it's really like, because there's an instant connection because they've been part of that program that you're already working on, that the student is part of, but at the same time they've made that step away. And one fantastic thing that happened this year after the lockdown was 2 of our alumni voluntarily got in touch and said, can we run fortnightly sessions with this year's students, just giving them advice, talking to them, reassuring them, telling them what it's like, giving them tips for their CVs and job interviews. And they were also then able to bring in people that they work with, including some really well-known editors and journalists, but also other alumni from their year who've gone off to do different jobs in different places. So I would say develop a way of using your alumni as much as possible for that, because they can make a really, really good connection. And what they say is obviously very much more believable than anything we say, because we're just the tutors and lecturers, and what do we know? And these are people who've been students in the same room on the same program.
Carolina wanted to say something. She raised her hand on the chat. And Sharon was saying something on the chat too, if everyone can read. Carolina?
Hi, everyone. So we have to go back a little bit, sorry, because I was thinking about what Bianca was telling us about her experience as a student. And then I was hearing from you teachers, because I'm a bit in the middle as a doctoral student. So I feel I can, I feel the others' pain, everyone here. So I think that teachers are also very tired, and it's very hard to treat others. They are not therapists, and they are themselves very tired and in need of therapy sometimes. It's very risky to recommend a therapist also. And I think that what Bianca may be seeking is empathy from teachers and not exactly therapy. I wrote on the chat board, I work with graphic medicine and mental health issues for a bit for my thesis in comics and graphic medicine. And I gave a masterclass last year in Lusofna on graphic medicine in Delhi, too, actually with my colleague alexandrabarradas that Mary knows from Bournemouth University. And I also know the Drawing Out program, I think from Cardiff. Maybe Tim knows something about this with Leslie and I don't know the other teacher's name. And maybe a way of approaching what Bianca was saying was to find ways to connect teachers and students through this kind of exercises of graphic medicine, maybe workshops for teachers and for students. And eventually, as we are talking about magazine studies, eventually, why not propose a graphic medicine magazine, or a way to connect with different experiences around mental health, and at the same time produce what they are supposed to produce. I don't know. This was just a thought from someone who's been thinking very much about these issues. So, thank you.
Can we go on? I can link research from mental health easily.
I was going to say, again, we could probably go on for quite a long time. Incidentally, was that Jenny Kitzinger's project that you were involved with, Carolina? But
sorry,
Jenny
what?
Kitzinger?
No, it's
no.
I have
okay.
Lisa El Hafai.
No, I don't know about that actually.
Okay.
Okay, so we've talked for nearly an hour actually already. So, and we haven't even touched on the academic respectability side. But I think we've covered a lot of really interesting things there. So I'm going to hand over to Carla to take us into the next phase of this discussion.
You are such an intelligent person, Tim. You got the good thing, now I got the bad thing, isn't it? So, I was saying that I could link very easily mental health problems and research, doing research. as we for sure almost of us know, this part of the discussion is interesting for us, for people that are doing research and has to go on. But the students are welcome to stay, but let me just tell you that it's not going to be so interesting, I believe, at least if you don't want to become academics in the future. But I had no idea that our talking circle was going the way this last hour was, but it was really interesting, Tim. Thank you very much, as usual. I have to tell you, it's so demanding to be an academic. So demanding. I don't know if you have the same, if it's the same way in other countries of the people that are in here, but usually if you say that you are a teacher at a university, people look like you and say, oh, it's rich and doesn't do anything. So, and it could be far from truth. It's not like that. And in the last years, it becomes worse because we have to do research and teach at the same time. And as you know, teaching is very tiring, is exhausting, as someone have told us here. And doing research, some people don't know, but we can't research for 5 minutes, have a coffee and then come back and research another 5. It's not like that. It doesn't work like that. We have to have time to do research. Okay, time, not 5 minutes, not half an hour, not 1 hour. We can start working on a class for half an hour and then interrupt and come back to our PowerPoint, to the class, but not with research. Half an hour, when we go back, we have to go to the beginning to remember everything. So it's very hard to have time for everything. If we have a family, even it gets better. I was told by an academic once, a woman academic, that she told me, I don't even have a cat, okay? And it was easier to produce, really. So why I'm talking about this? I love magazine studies. I've been studying magazines my whole life since I started to research, to do my master. And I don't think, I am sure this is a very, very interesting research field. It deserves to be, to has a place that doesn't have right now. We are very few, but I don't think that's a weakness to be, because we are just great. And when I'm saying that we are great, it's not just an academic point of view, it's a great environment. And I have at least one person here, maybe two, is Liana Azevedo, that started researching magazines, and she's in love. Because magazines has this effect on people. We start working on them and then we can't stop. But getting real to the real world, we need to present results. And when I say present results, at least in Portugal, and I think in Europe as a whole, I don't know exactly how it works on the States, but people that are here can tell us. We need to publish, and it's not anywhere. We need to publish on indexed journals, period. It's all that matters. Because it's
and in English. And in English,
it's all that matters, and it's not the university that says that it has to be like that. It's the structures that evaluate universities. So we can't. We have to have our PhDs for sure, minimum stand, and then we have to do research, and we have to publish regularly, if possible, every year, and things like that. That's why so many academics are completely burnout, okay, because this is not easy at all. I want to continue to research on magazine studies, but for doing that, I have to publish. And it's really hard to publish when we work on magazine studies, because magazine studies is really a specific field with specific characteristics. Sometimes near journalism, sometimes near design, sometimes near history, sometimes near almost everything. So the problem is when we go to a journal, a history journal or a journalism journal, we are not quite working on the core of that journal. So we have less possibilities to get published, to get to pass the peer review process and get published. And that's a problem. That is really a problem. So I was talking with him. We have been talking for a while now about these things. The last idea, more solid, that we had, it's about the papers that we have received for mapping the magazine, this edition, and all the other papers that we know that some of us have and couldn't publish until now. You all know, I think you all know that we had an invitation from an editor to publish them as a book, but we don't think that that's the better idea for us. When I say for us, it's for the magazine studies group, we can call it like that, community, the magazine studies community, to use a magazine word. We think that it's time to found a journal. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I only know the American AEG, that Kevin, that is here, and Joy, I don't know if she's here, are in the board of that journal, but it's not enough. It's one journal for the whole world. Come on, it's not enough. And we have to do our way to get the journal indexed, so everyone could have a place that could send their papers, be evaluated, pass for the peer review, fail or pass, never mind, but a place that is specific for us. We deserve it, and the world deserves to have papers on magazine studies because they are worth it. And I thought that instead of getting all the papers on one book and then we don't know where the book is, and in our curriculum the book it's not heavy enough doesn't serve us, we could bring the papers, starting with the less that are older, that have less probabilities of passing to research, to evaluation, and start with them for the first numbers. I'm saying this because it takes 2 years to be possible to try to have our journal indexed. So the first 2 years, that journal is not going to be indexed for sure, but it has to start somewhere. Because I think we have a lot of good work done. In Lusófona, we had an experience like that. Teresa is aware of it. It was with a colleague of us, Professor Vitor Flores, that also have a conference that it was created by him, not that we hosted once, but that was created by him here in Lusófona, about stereotype. Tell me the...
Stereo and immersive media.
Stereo and immersive media, so it is a niche, it's a very small field too. And what Vitor did, it was to found a journal. First, because I've been speaking with him at lunch today to remember things that he already told me, and it's a very small journal. It just has 6 articles, 2 are from invited person, no peer review, and the other 4 come from peer-reviewed model. So you see 6 papers, it's very few. So with all that we have, maybe we can feed some numbers. And you don't have to be ambitious and have monthly journal. We can have just twice a year or even once a year. We just need to start coming. But for doing that, we need a team, of course. It's not a team TIM, but the team TEAM, with team, of course, but not just team, not just team and I, or just 3 people. We need, and what we thought too, and I'm going to shut up quickly, what we thought too is that that could be the start for partnerships, for doing international research, for not just each of us looking at to themselves. Because when we get here, we discover that there are a lot of people studying the same subjects in other countries that could do very good things together. That's my main idea for now, because I think this is really important. And if, for instance, I would love to hear Kevin on this and everyone else that wanted to. I don't see no one with their hands raised, but I would love to hear. I'm going to read the chat too. I don't know if you want to speak, Kevin.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk. I put a couple of things in the chat. The issues we've had with the Journal of Magazine Media. So over the last 2 years or so, we've transitioned from being a self-published open access online journal to collaborating with the University of Nebraska Press, having a formal publishing system. And as you said, it takes a while to get the indexing. And we're in the last stage now of indexing with Scopus. So Magdalena Sternadori, who's obviously a big part of Mapping the Magazine, she's our reviews editor, and she's been spearheading that Scopus indexing. It is difficult. You have to write an ethics statement. You have to submit the last 2 years of issues, and they'll go through it with you. The last Mapping the Magazine in Chicago was the largest burst in new submissions of magazine research that we've had, and in fact that conference has been feeding us for the last 2 years, really. In terms of publishing papers, which has been terrific. And some of the people on this call have been published with us. In fact, I even had one paper that was presented yesterday that has already been submitted to the journal. And for privacy reasons, I won't go into more than that, but this has been a terrific thing for our journal. I will say it's hard to find the number of submissions we need to support anything more than 2 times a year. It's been picking up, and I think that the Chicago Mapping the Magazine was a big push for us, and partly because I had taken over as journal editor at that point, and I happened to attend, and I did some active recruiting, and I think that's been really, or active solicitation, and that's been a really good thing for the journal. We've also been doing our best to expand the international nature of it. I mean, we are from the Association for Education in Journalism and Mass Communication, AEJMC, which is largely a North American institution, but there's no reason people from around the world can't submit. And we've taken on 2 British associate editors in the last year. Joy Jenkins stepped down because she's taking over the leadership of our magazine division at AEJMC. And so she wanted to focus on that, and also took a new tenure track position. And as you said, teaching and research are a full-time job, even without being the associate editor of a journal. But in the last year, we've been publishing authors mostly from Anglophone countries so far, but we have expanded internationally quite a bit. We have Australian submissions, we have submissions from New Zealand, we have submissions from the UK. And those have been terrific, and I think are really enhancing the study of magazines. Getting indexed is key. For researchers, that's true in the United States as well. There's a range of types of colleges and universities. I am at an institution that balances toward teaching over research, though they still value research quite highly. And I think a lot of us have run into the problem that magazines are seen as a subject and not as a discipline. There's not one way to study magazines, as you're saying. So you might be coming from a field of literature, you might be coming from history, you might be a social scientist. There are many different ways to approach them, and I think that is what has made magazines more marginalized as research, because they are seen as one small piece of a discipline. So when you submit to a disciplinary journal, they may look at you as marginal. And I think that's an important reason to have have a magazine journal that does look at magazines as something that in and of themselves are very important. The other thing I'd say before I stop talking is that we've been trying to expand what we consider to be a magazine. In a world where magazines are moving into the digital realm entirely, or we had a panel at AJMC a few years ago that I asked the 5 panelists each to bring in something that they considered to be a magazine that they didn't think other people would consider. So somebody brought in a subscription box that sends you physical objects every month. One panelist proposed that physical museums are very similar to the kinds of things that magazines do, that they're structured the same way, that there are small exhibits at the beginning and then the large featured exhibit in the middle, and then they send you out through the gift shop, which is like the service section of the magazine. And there were some really interesting ideas about conceptualizing what makes something a magazine. So we've been good about trying to publish articles about, we published one a year or two ago about Pinterest, the social media site, because it's about curating and collection and brand making and some of the same ideas that fit in with magazines. We would accept something about a television news magazine if somebody made a compelling case that that was within the scope of the journal. So we are trying to expand that. At this point, we're probably getting around a dozen submissions a year at most, and publishing somewhere in the range of half of that. We publish about 3 refereed articles per year. Plus, we try to make room in every issue for 1 non-refereed article. So somebody who publishes an essay that doesn't go through the full peer review process, but can sort of expand on ideas of journalism. And I think a lot of what Mapping the Magazine does would fit well into that as well. It may not work in the same way if you were looking to be evaluated by your institution. Obviously, peer review indexing are very important for institutional evaluation. But for instance, one that I believe we're publishing in the next issue, it's either this one or the following one, is from a master's student who isn't quite at the level of peer-reviewed research with his work, but is applying to doctoral programs. And he has very interesting ideas that maybe aren't quite at the same level of academic rigor, but we can publish it in that first section and expand the world a little bit. So that's where we are in the Journal of Magazine Media. We slowed down a little bit in our transition to publishing with Nebraska, just because it shifted our entire production schedule. They have a 6-month lead time, where when we were self-published, we had an instantaneous lead time, and that led to about a 6-month delay. But we have a double issue coming out probably in the autumn, September, that will have us caught up to a regular publication schedule. So, so that's us. That's where we are and what we're doing.
Kevin, do you think that there is space for another journal, or for your experience, you think there is not?
Hard to say. I'm being a little bit selfish, and I don't necessarily need the competition.
Of course, I understand.
I would love for there to be room for it. The one thing I'd caution is they can be expensive, particularly if you're looking to publish in print.
Not print.
No. The publisher. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was the other journal that I was talking about that we do here in Lusofna is digital, only digital.
Yeah, when we signed the contract with the publisher, they actually encouraged us to do a print journal because they actually think they make more money selling the print journal, and that there is still a demand, particularly among pre-tenure faculty, to have that print copy that they can show. There's still something about print that a lot of people see as validation. There's a little bit more seriousness to it, they see. Our membership does not get free access to the print journal. They do get free access with their membership to the digital journal. But I'll admit, I keep them here on my bookshelf, and I've got my my Journal of Magazine Media, and it looks really good, and I love to be able to hold it. So.
Sharon, but before you go on, would you like to be in a project like that? Because you need to go.
Would I like to be in the project of thinking about another journal?
Yes.
I don't know.
You don't have time.
Okay, we'll talk about that. Thank you. I have to go lead another meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Sharon.
It's what we are talking about. We need people. If you don't have people, we don't have a project for sure. Yeah. Team. I think I don't know. Oh, there was something else, because really magazine studies are not on the international associations. There is no working group on magazine studies anywhere. But we go. I'm going to the starting point again. We need people that want to do that. It can't be just 1-2 people. It has to be more than that. Doesn't have to be 3,000, but I don't know how many. But just 1 or 2, it's not enough, isn't it, Tim?
Well, that's right. It obviously needs a team, but I don't think anybody should feel pressured into putting their hand up right now. We're not going to try and shame anybody into saying yes, I'll do it. But you know, if it plants a seed, and obviously taking into account everything that Kevin has already said and his beautifully well-established journal there, would obviously be serious competition if we want to think of competition in academic terms. But I think, I mean, I would like to think there's room for another one, not necessarily in print, and with all due respect to what Kevin has said, and bearing in mind that, you know, you've got British members of your board, I think one of the things that we see at Mapping the Magazine is an astonishing variety of international delegates, and particularly at this moment in history, I think it would be a really great opportunity to think about starting a journal from that point, that there is a world, literally a world of material out there. There are areas, although we've got a really good international delegation, this conference, there's a whole continent. Well, no, because Ibrahim has been here, but you know, we only have one submission from Africa, from an African country. There's nowhere from China. We haven't got anybody from India this year. So there is a whole world of material out there, and Miglena Sternadori and I know from doing the handbook that we've done, there are people out there studying magazines in other parts of the world, and it would be great to try and encourage access to their knowledge and scholarship.
Not to encourage the competition, but if you do look into starting something like this, I think one good place would be to look at the International Association of Literary Journalism Studies, IALJS, which is about 20 years old at this point. And they run their own journal. It's actually a self-published print journal. And you might want to talk to Bill Reynolds, who's the editor of that journal and out of Canada, and he's terrific. But he could tell you about the experience of getting a journal like that off the ground. And there's quite a bit of actually Portuguese-speaking literary journalism studies that's published in there, which I know is well represented in this group as well.
Yeah, I can renew my conversation with Bill about the music of Kevin Ayers too. That's a very niche reference for everybody.
I think that people that didn't talk yet, if they want to add something. Oh, sorry, Mary, you have your hand up, please.
Yes, Tim, I have a question for you. How long did it take you, Miglena, to write the book?
Well, it actually took 2 years. but it was interrupted by a major medical situation that delayed it for at least a year.
And the other thing,
you mean this book?
Yes, yes, indeed I do. I've requested a copy already.
Well, there are several people on this call who should be entitled to copies, I think.
I think the one thing I want to say, Tim, is how did you both manage to make time? Because I'm on a fractional post at Bournemouth, but I know you're full-time, and I think Magdalena's full-time as well. How on earth did you manage to make that time? And how much of your downtime did you have to sacrifice, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I mean, it's a full-time thing to do. I mean, and I have to acknowledge that there were times when Magdalena was taking a lot more of the burden than I was, and she seems to have a absolutely phenomenal work ethic. I'm sure that Kevin would agree with that. But yeah, it took a lot of time. I mean, obviously a lot of it is contributed material, contributed chapters. So
don't give us all details, Tim. Save something for the book launch tomorrow.
Yeah, okay, I will. But it took a lot of time, but you know, it was a major project for a major publisher, and obviously that's, you know, very good news for all sorts of reasons. So it was worth doing. But yeah, you don't have much time for other things at certain points.
Yeah, that's true. My books were much thinner than that, and they took enough time. So I really understand how difficult it must have been. And I think it's, you know, I'm really looking forward to reading it.
It's got lots of good stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And there are someone that, if there is no one, I would like just to ask Celiana, please, just to tell us how did she fall in love with American, I'm sorry, magazine studies research?
Yes, that's so true. My first experience researching magazine started last year. When I was researching Ilustração, ABC, and Domingo Ilustrado, the magazines that I presented yesterday. And for me, which was a fantastic experience, because the goal was to know everything about these magazines, because my previous experiences was, for example, to research a subject in the newspaper or a subject in a specific magazine, but this time was to know the magazines. To know everything about that, when they were created, if they were more refined magazine, more modest magazines, about what they wrote, what is the public, who was the reader, and especially how the magazines have transformed through their history. To do a comparison, I have another field of research that I research elderly people. And when I was at the library reading and flipping the magazine, I was thinking that to know a magazine very well, the history, everything about the magazine, is almost as interviewing elderly people, because the magazine was old, almost 100 years old, and you need to be very attentive. You need to spend a lot of time in the library and to be very attentive to the details, the photos, the paper, the quality, the language, and it was such a fantastic experience for me. A challenge, of course, but it's something that was very nice. And I told to Carla that when I finished researching these magazines, I was a little bit in love because it's like a person, have a personality, have such interesting characteristics. They are beautiful because they are different, and I was absolutely in love with the magazines. After that, I started researching older magazines, more contemporary. Flama, for example, began to be published in 1937, and the main purpose at the beginning, the magazine was talking about religion, but when it ceased to be published, she was totally different. She had nudity in the cover. He talked about sex, about everything. So it was fantastic to see the transformation, and because of that, I'm absolutely in love with the magazine. So I hope I can continue researching the magazine. Now I'm researching O Século Ilustrado, is another Portuguese magazine, very interesting too. So it's my experience. By now it's fantastic, and maybe in the next map in the magazine I can present something new that I'm researching now.
Thanks, Eliana.
You're welcome.
I just like to give the floor to Jael because he has an interesting researching story too to share with us, please. You have to unmute yourself.
It was difficult to unmute my computer. Well, I started by accident. I got in touch with some material that was published during the Portuguese colonial war. And then I went after it. And there's a whole, I think it's 360 titles around that. The number is not right because there's not all of them are in the library. Some of them are in the hands of people that made them. So yet, it's 360 titles. Some of them, there were journals and magazines that were published during the colonial war by the units. In some papers they're called trench papers or trench magazines, but they're made in there, and there was absolutely no bibliography. There was no one had ever worked on them, and it's something that it's really fascinating to find something that's so huge, because those were the people, the military that were in the colonial war, in Portuguese colonial war. Those were the people that turned the country around and brought democracy to Portugal, and and they had this amazing literary production, the journalist production, huge. Some of them are in line with the government, with what the government published. Some of them are just absolutely against the government. Some of them were. I'm working in an article for for a conference now on the chaplains, the military chaplains. Some of them were saying that Christ was revolutionary during the war in the front line, and that's something that's really amazing to find and fascinating to work with, and that's what I'm researching now. That's my research at the moment.
Thanks, Jael. I think that, I don't know if does anybody want, well, Kevin has just made an invitation. Maybe he can verbalize to us.
Sure, I was just saying that, so Catherine Staub, who's also on this call, is the current head of the magazine media division of AEJMC. And we're one of the very few organizations that really is devoted to magazine studies, and we have some of the same problems as a division that I think magazine studies in general have, which is as the physical magazine there's a reputation that it's sort of an afterthought within the organization, right? That magazines are only that specific glossy print product that so many of us really do love. But I think that there is room, even though we are a North America focused organization, to bring in more international scholars. And I think, as Tim was talking about bringing in scholars, particularly from Asia, there's huge energy from Asian countries, China, Korea, in AEJMC, particularly with graduate students who are, well, they are the future of magazine research, or of all research. And so we'd love to have everybody on this at Mapping the Magazine as a member of the organization. And we'd be open also to ideas of collaboration with the journal, you know, to talking about bringing in new international editorial board members, people who are representatives abroad. And that's been a real focus recently. So, you know, if the new journal does happen, I wish it success, obviously. Though I think there are ways that we could also, thank you, Mary, for sharing the membership link. Easy to click right there into the chat and join up. We're a great collegial group, and there's a lot of overlap with other divisions. You know, we have historians in the group. We have legal scholars who look at magazines and the law. We would love to be able to have even a special issue devoted to Mapping the Magazine, or if there is interest in a co-sponsorship in the journal, these are all possibilities. Even alternating issues. You know, we are currently twice a year. We could do a 4 times a year issue with every second issue, or 3 perhaps, you know, every few months, where we have 2 issues of general submissions and then 1 issue that is a Mapping the Magazine branded issue of the journal. It's a possibility. These are all things we're open to. But yes, please join the division. It's a great division.
I think that magazines are much more than I know that everybody thinks about print when they think about magazine. I've met with James before the conference. It was me and Teresa to prepare the keynote. Remember, Teresa? And he told me something that I can't forget anymore, and it got me really worried, because he said that at FIP, the words magazine publishing was forbidden words. So I got really scared. But I think that the magazine format is much wider than print, much wider. For me, for instance, call me crazy if you want, I think that we can find out the magazine format on radio, on TV. It's everywhere, you know, because it's a format. It's like Tim told us in his paper. It's the characteristics that are getting in other places than print. So I think we have to think about magazine media, like your journal is called. Great name. What a pity to have you. I'm just kidding. But I think we have to think about magazine media, not just magazine publishing, you know, that connects us right away with paper and only with paper. And for me,
agree.
Yeah, we renamed our division 2-3 years ago, and there were long debates over several years of what to call it. And some of them got to be very long. They were about community, long form, literary. And I mean, it just, all of these words kept getting tacked on, and magazine media in the end won, in large part because that is also how the professional organization in the United States renamed itself. So they are now the Association of Magazine Media.
Yeah, I think that's fairly widespread now, isn't it? That change. Well, thank you for all of those ideas, Kevin and Catherine. I think that's really something to think about. So did you have anything you wanted to add, Carla? Any last minute methodological discussions?
No,
perhaps not.
Methodological, no. I just wanted to say that something that puzzles me, and there are here people from Clarissa and Mariana is from that class. In Portugal, we don't have, as I told us to people that are on MTM5, we don't have academic teaching on magazines in Portugal. And 2 years after MTM5, we still don't have. And I know that the programs are getting smaller in other countries, so maybe it's not easy to get it here now. This year 2019-20, I was able to open as a choice, as a, how do you call it, a unit, not a curricular unit, it's an optional creative unit, a unit called journalism, magazine journalism in the digital age, it's the name. And I got the 15 students, and they got 14. They are, Clarice and Mariana are in that class. And one thing that I tried is to connect with the industry. We have a magazine that is waiting for the features that they have made after the teacher correct them. And it's a first step. But for instance, I talk about an older magazine that you must know because it's not Portuguese, Bravo. I think it was German, Oliver, for teenagers.
German,
about music, and it was German, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was German, and it was in German when I was in my teens.
Yeah, it was in German.
And people bought it because of the posters of the musicians.
Published in German, and Portuguese teenagers, they all bought it, and then they were a version in Portuguese, and then it closed some years ago. And my students that are 18 years old, they knew the magazine. Oh yes, Bravo, with those marvelous posters to put. So it disappeared, and the need was there. You know, that's weird. And it was paper. And I'm not going to say
paper. Batteries never go down. Batteries, so it's a huge advantage.
You can finish, Tim.
I was going to say, on that nostalgic note, shall we say goodbye for this evening? And I'm sure we will welcome lots of you back tomorrow. But this has been another fantastic day of papers and discussion and stimulation and interest and energy, as Kevin said. So thank you all very much. Thank you for coming along to this. And oh, you said I had to tell people about the book launch, which is happening tomorrow. So come back for that tomorrow. But yeah, see you tomorrow or at the next Mapping the Magazine, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, good night.
Bye. Goodbye.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
I see you.